give up, and he walks over me. Then someone comes by with words loud and strong. Arise, my child, it is I, and I'm still on the throne. And he's still on the throne. He is still on the throne. So what could be right? There could be nothing wrong. What's wrong with my
And good afternoon. You're listening to Nuts and Bolts. I'm Matt Middlebrooke, the host of Nuts and Bolts, and glad to have you along today. It's a beautiful day outside, and glad to be here with you today. What are you doing? Oh, okay. Man. Anyway, if you're listening to us on Lighthouse Radio, I was asking my wife why she was moving my camera, but I can see someone bumping into it, I guess. But anyway, we're glad to be here on YouTube and Facebook and on Lighthouse Radio, which is our online radio station here at Souls Harbor Baptist Church. Very important. We are moving the program. Don't worry, it doesn't involve boxes. We're just moving the program over to Lighthouse, the Lighthouse Facebook page, and also on YouTube. So you better go like Facebook, Lighthouse Christian Radio on Facebook, and then also follow us, subscribe on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel now, and that's where I will be now. That's my home. So this is the last week. We've actually been doing a simulcast where we've been showing the program on the Souls Harbor Baptist website or YouTube, as well as the Lighthouse Christian Radio on as well. So, but we're going to port right over there, not be on Souls Harbor Baptist Church YouTube and Facebook. So next week, so that's why we need you all to go over to the Lighthouse Christian Radio on Facebook, and also subscribe on our YouTube channel, and that's where I will be next week. And so that's very important, very important. So if you don't see us for some reason next week, make sure you check out the Lighthouse Christian Radio stuff there. That's about it for now. I'll try to remind you guys at the end of the program about that as well. As for the weather, it is nice. It's cooler outside. Fall is definitely at home now here in the state of Wisconsin, and Old Man Winter has moved into the northern plains. So for all of our friends out there in South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, they are experiencing snow, as far as I know. So they have had a lot of snow out there already. So they had a really early snowstorm, and so anyway, no snow here in Milwaukee. I can't see out the window today. But I was out there all day today. I was being macho man, trying to get some dirt, some trees pulled up in my backyard. I got some small trees that are really, actually not small anymore. They're quite good size. And trying to get rid of them. And trying to get some areas cleaned out in my backyard. And I feel like I almost got nowhere, but my body is saying, that was silly. You overworked. So that's just what happens. But we did get something done today, thankfully. So, but yeah. So it was a nice day today there outside. Enough about the weather. Moving on. I was just looking up. I like to find out what national days are on the days that I sit here and do Nuts and Bolts. And today is National Bologna Day.
I heard about that.
Yeah, was it? What, was Joe Biden speaking today or something? National Bologna Day is every day for him. It's also National Food Day, which I guess has to do with awareness of eating good food. So I don't know how that really coincides with Bologna Day, because I don't think bologna is all that good for you. But I don't even know what bologna is made out of. I mean, is it the cousin to Spam or anything else? I don't know. I don't know what bologna is. I haven't either. It doesn't look very appetizing. It has that kind of pale look to it, sort of like what Joe Biden looks like. He's kind of pale. So anyway. So it's National Bologna Day for those that like bologna. It's also United Nations Day. So this is the day we can remember how bad the United Nations is and how much they have made the world a worse place to live. So, yeah. I will end on a good note. Well, that's kind of funny. I went down through the National Day stuff. Well, okay. October, it's National Sarcastic Awareness Month. So For all you sarcastic people out there, it's your month out there. Don't overdo it, because too much sarcasm is really annoying. But if you do it right, sarcasm can actually be very effective. So, yeah, so that's it. It's also National Pastors Month. So, yeah. So make sure that you appreciate your pastor. Pastor Appreciation Month. Forgive me. I took a nap and I woke up about an hour or so ago. So the cobwebs are still up there in the old brain.
You're on your second cup of coffee.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to my second cup of coffee. Although I didn't really get coffee the second time around. Looks like I got something else. But anyway, it's not bologna, that's for sure. But it sure is colored like bologna.
No, Pastor said it's just a flat hot dog.
Oh, it's a flat hot dog? Really? I like hot dogs. I don't know. We got to look that up.
Bologna is like mixed up meat like hot dogs is.
Oh, that's true.
I mean,
maybe-
some bologna even has like.
I think maybe it's the meat that maybe bologna is the meat that the hot dog really couldn't even qualify as a hot dog. You know, you have hot dog meat and then you got bologna meat. It's like you're getting down there. I mean, you're getting down there close to the United Nations. You know, that's pretty much it. All right. What?
How'd you eat it when you were a kid?
Eat what? Hot dogs?
No, bologna.
I didn't. Well, I didn't eat much bologna when I was a kid.
It was bread, bologna, and mayonnaise.
Well,
That's how I ate
all
it.
right. Well, now
And
we've
the
lost.
plastic-
If Pastor's
and you
watching,
weren't
we've
careful
lost
enough-
Pastor now. We have brought up mayonnaise, so we have lost Pastor
You
now.
weren't careful enough, you might chew on the plastic part of the bologna.
Okay, that's getting gross. Okay, let's keep going here.
You had to take that off before
Well,
you eat it.
that's a bunch of
I'm sure
baloney.
you know what
That's it's a bunch of phony baloney. Phony baloney, isn't that kind of...
I'm
All right, now let's moving on. So we talked about the weather. We've talked about what else? Politics a little bit. Oh yeah, President Trump's going to be over in Waukesha in a couple of hours, and I think if you go stand in line now, you'll be in the nosebleeds. But if you're still interested, he is out there, and he'll be at the Waukesha Airport because the county folks here in Milwaukee County said no to the president for the president to come to Mitchell International. I don't get that, but
The Waukesha Health Department is trying to keep people away.
oh yeah. People are trying to. Anyway, we gotta be. I mean, this COVID thing is interesting. It doesn't work. It's very interesting. Don't touch. And all that. So, but the president looked really good the other night during his debate. He looked very healthy compared to his opponent. So, anyway, enough about politics. It's all around us. We don't need to always bring it into nuts and bolts, but that's part of the conversational faux pas around here. We talk about the weather, we talk about politics, and we talk about religion. So let's get to the religion because I didn't get to that yet. But actually, there's a lot of things that are on my mind today. But we'll start with the show notes I was given to me by my daughter. And actually, it's good. It's a good topic. It has to do with standing alone for God. And she was talking about the other day. She's learning it in her school, and she mentioned a couple of people in the Bible that stood alone for God. The first man that she talks about is David. David stood alone, and he stood alone with Goliath. And you know the story of Goliath, where you had the children of Israel versus the Philistines, and the children of Israel army was quaking in their shoes, and they were scared of Goliath. He was the champion of the Philistines, and we don't know how tall he was. Well, they give some dimensions of Samson, but he sounds like a very tall man, at least maybe 9 feet tall or 10 feet tall, somewhere around there. And that's pretty big for a person. And Goliath was very formidable, and nobody wanted to fight Goliath. And David comes along. He comes along because his dad said, "Hey, take some bread and cheese to your brothers." And so he brings the food to his brothers, and they told him to go home, David. And But David said to his brothers, "Who's going to take that big, mouthy guy down?" and the brothers said, "Go home, and or you'll get lost." So David went away, but he went away to the king, and told the king, "Hey, listen, I stood alone with a bear, and I stood alone with a lion, and I can stand with it against this giant because God is with me." And so in fact, David was not standing alone. God was standing with him. And so David went out, and he took 5 stones, and he took a sling, and he went out before the giant. And nobody thought that David would survive. And the brothers were like, "Oh boy!" And we don't know what the brothers said, but I'm sure that they were scared somehow for David, but they were not scared. They were too scared to go after him. Can you imagine? I mean, think about it. You're the brothers. You're seeing your brother do this. Your youngest brother, the baby of the family, out there doing what you were supposed to be doing. But they were scared. Think about it. One of them probably thought, "Well, we should just go out and grab him and pull him back." But they were all scared of the giant. And not to mention, it looked really, really, really weak for them to go grab their brother and pull him back. Can you imagine Goliath seeing them come out and get his brother? So they're like, well, David chose his way of going. So David stood there. And David stood before the giant. And David won the contest not because he was smarter or anything like that. He knew God, and he trusted God, and God guided that stone where it needed to go for the giant, and the giant came tumbling down. And David won the day. But really God won the day, because really our strength comes from the Lord. And I remember one of the Psalms, David's Psalm. David said, "Some men trust in horses, some in chariots, but we will trust in the name of the Lord." So, I can imagine David maybe writing that psalm and thinking about how he stood before Goliath, and he stood alone, but God was with him. God was with him. Another man who stood alone is not just David, but is a man with another D name. His name is Daniel. Now, Daniel stood alone in a foreign country called Babylon. And he was there a long time, because Daniel was a man of courage, but he was also a man of conviction. He had character about him. He didn't eat the king's meat when he was a kid, and because it was against because the meat he was going to eat, I believe, was not kosher for the Israelites. Although God did not say that they could not eat the meat. God didn't say anything about that when he said when he told the children of Israel that they were going to be captured and taken into Babylon. Put your hand down, Rose. He said, God didn't tell them that they couldn't eat the meat, and he didn't condemn. No one was condemned for maybe eating it, but Daniel was convicted in his heart that he shouldn't. So at that time, he told the eunuch, he said, "Listen, give us pulse, and give us this food that we feel is right for us to eat, and if we don't look healthier or whatnot after a certain amount of days, then we'll go from there, as it were." But after 7 days of eating pulse, they looked great. They looked better. They had a better complexion than those that ate the king's meat. So they continued to be able to eat that food. By the way, it's not exactly, people talk about the Daniel diet. If to each their own. But Daniel continued to stand for God, and you know what? God blessed him. God blessed Daniel, and God blessed those that were with Daniel. Think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who stood before King Nebuchadnezzar and said, "We're not going to bow down to that big old statue you have built." And so they were tossed in the fire, and they didn't get burned, and was a great testimony to Nebuchadnezzar, a man who had to be humbled later. But then Daniel continued on, and he served under a man named Darius. or Darius. And there were these wise, and he was the top wise guy, the top leader underneath the king, under King Darius in the land. And he had a bunch of jealous men that were there that wanted that position. But Daniel, this foreigner, he had the position. And so they thought, well, we know what Daniel does each day. We know that Daniel goes up and he prays. He opens his window so everybody sees him. And Daniel didn't do it to be seen of men, but it was a way of doing it before God. And so he would open up his window toward Jerusalem, and he would pray. And he was consistent about this, so much so that these men, Rose, honey, I have my daughter sitting here in the studio. Be careful with those. She has a set of headphones. There we go. There you go. Now you can hear it. And so these men knew that David would pray, and so they came up with this phony decree of, you know what, King, you are great, live forever, and we want you to sign this decree where no one can serve or worship anybody but you for 30 days. Talk about a limit, it's like a limited, law, as it were. What? Kind of like the mask mandate. Well, okay. Anyway, so the king, not really reading and not really kind of figuring out what these guys were doing, said, "Oh, okay, that sounds like a great idea. No one worships anyone but me." And I don't know what his full thought was. Now, remember, Darius liked Daniel, and so. And Daniel knew what they were doing, and Daniel knew why they were doing it. It wasn't for actually worshiping the king. It was just to get him and knocked off his position. And so Daniel continued to pray. And the guys were down below, waited for the windows to open. Boom, there was Daniel praying. Ruh-roh, you have disobeyed the law. And so Daniel was taken before the king, and the king was sorry for what he had done. But it was the decree of the Medes and the Persians, and so on and so forth. So they threw Daniel in the lion's den, and God shut the mouth of the lions. And the next day, after Darius didn't get one wink of sleep, went out and said, "Daniel, you still there? And O king, live forever. I am still here." And the king was much relieved, and the wise men that were not so wise. Looking back now, if you think about it, it wasn't a very wise idea to maybe do this decree thing. They became the breakfast for the lions. And, but Daniel stood alone. And before these kings, these leaders of Babylon, and God blessed Daniel. God blessed Daniel for his stance. So we need to stand, too. And that should be the application. We should stand for God. We should stand for what's right. We should stand for truth. And it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to do, to stand. In fact, I lack courage sometimes in areas of standing. I even think simply about folks that take the courage of putting a sign outside their house that say they are supporting our president. And I'll be honest, I'm a little scared to do that. The idea, because you're hearing there's a lot of people talking about what might happen after the election, and it takes courage to do that, to actually in an area that doesn't support the president. That's a courageous thing to do. Is it standing for ideals of God? I mean, really, what we're standing for when we're putting out our support for someone who's standing for what is right in our country. That's where that's where I think it's a courageous thing to do. I think it's courageous. But we need to stand. When people mock God, we should stand for God and be like, hey, listen, that's not right. And when we witness for the Lord, we're standing for Him. When we hand out a tract or we talk to somebody about God, about Him, that's courageous. Standing for Him. When those are just small things. Across the world, people are standing for God in countries that oppose God. I mean, 100% oppose Him. and yet they are standing for him. We talk a lot about the Chinese underground church. There are other countries, though, beyond China, where Christians cannot meet openly, and so we need to remember those and that are standing for their God. That we should pray for them, that they continue to stand, and that they continue to be courageous. So let's do that. Let's be more. Let's God help us to be courageous, and let's exercise our courage. God's given us that courage. It's just, are we willing to exercise it and trust Him? You know, when we stand somewhat alone, we aren't really standing alone. If we are standing for truth and for God, God's with us.
Reminds me of Elijah or Elisha when they felt like they were alone. But God
Yes,
really
Elijah.
felt
I guess my wife brings up the producer wife brings up Elijah. That's right. Elijah thought he was alone. God, I'm the only guy left. And God said, no, there are 70,000 others, the remnant, that are also standing for me, and you just aren't aware of them, because Elijah felt like he was all alone after standing on Mount Carmel, and then he got all scared somehow and ran away. But we need to stand. We need to stand for God, and we need to ask God what it is, what it is that He wants us to stand for. And I believe right now we need to stand for truth. Truth is getting run over everywhere. And we see that. We see that in news and media. We see truth trying to be hid, being pushed down, squashed, as it were. And so we need to stand. We need to proclaim what is true, and not let people define truth that isn't really truth. That's a big thing going on these days. All right. Well, nothing that came. And we're winding down. We're actually winding down the home stretch. We've got about 7 minutes left, and here on the program, this is Nuts and Bolts. Remember, like the Lighthouse Christian Radio on Facebook, or if you're not on Facebook but you follow us on YouTube, make sure you follow Lighthouse Christian Radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, so that next week you can be made aware of the program, because we're going to be just exclusively on our Lighthouse Christian Radio Facebook and YouTube pages. We've been on both for a bit. We've been on the Souls Harbor Baptist Church site as well as on the Lighthouse Christian Radio site. So remember, like us on Facebook or subscribe on our YouTube channel. Speaking of Souls Harbor Baptist, we've got church services tomorrow. And it's 9:30 Sunday school, 10:45 morning worship service. So if you're in the area, we're at 3800 South Howell Avenue. The heat will be on. Our boilers are working. We have new boilers now, so our radiators are mostly working, I think. And takes a little bit to get the air out of the system. And so that was been going on for the last week, getting the air out of the system. But we do have the boilers working now, and thanks to our contractor for putting all that in and getting it all up and running. A lot of noise in the background there. Thank you. All right. Another thing that came to mind, on our bus, we have a bus here at Souls Harbor Baptist, and it's a Bluebird flat-nose bus. And recently some things have been coming up with it. And one thing that's been coming up is we've been having the batteries draining on us without the bus on. And you're wondering, how does that happen? How does anything lose battery power if it's not turned on? Well, it occurs when you have some sort of an accessory that might be, or maybe even wiring, that is allowing electricity to flow without anything being turned on. It's called a parasitic drain, and so it's or parasitic draw. It's the official way, and that's where electricity is being pulled from the battery and being pulled somewhere, and it's been happening with our bus. And I was thinking about it, what about this this issue. And one way to find it is you go through all the different circuits and you start pulling fuses or breakers to see if the draw goes away. Another way you can kind of do it in the interim, because trucks and buses can naturally have these draws built in it. They often put a switch in to turn off the battery power, and that prevents any it just cuts the any kind of circuit flow that might happen. But I was thinking that in our life we can have parasitic draws, things that can take the energy out of us, things that can pull down our spirit and drain the life out of our spirit. And one thing that came to mind was that the Bible talks about not having any root of bitterness. Bitterness is one thing that can take the life out of a person. It really can. It can just take the day can be consumed by thoughts of bitterness toward people. And that's why the Bible says a root of bitterness. Think about a root. What does a root do? A root pulls nutrients and water and things out of the soil around it, which is a good thing for a tree to do. But sometimes it can take all the nutrients and everything out of the ground around it. And if it runs out of that, if it pulls all that out, then it can actually die. But thinking about a root of bitterness in somebody's soul is that it can pull all the nutrients and all of the various things of that person's soul really out of them, and then they can grow into a tree of bitterness, and it becomes the predominant thing in that person's life. And so we need to be careful. The Bible talks about don't have any root of bitterness, don't have anything in there that can draw life out of you, really without reason. It's really not. The only thing that bitterness hurts is the person that has bitterness. Whoever that person's bitter against doesn't really affect them, but it may seem like they're affecting that other person, but they're not. It's just really all focused on themselves, and it takes the life out of that person, and it takes away from their mission of glorifying God, because that bitterness now has become the glorifying thing in their life. And so I was thinking, parasitic draws out all that electricity out of the battery, and makes that bus ineffective. Right now we can't start the bus because there's not enough electricity in the batteries to start the bus. We'll have to go get a jump pack of some sort or some kind of charging mechanism to bring life back into the batteries to start the bus again. And this time we're going to put a switch in so that we can prevent that from happening, the draw from hurting the batteries. Now, we can't put a master switch per se for bitterness and cut off the effects of bitterness. The way we cut off bitterness is what I did today. I took a pick and I went out and I dug up the roots of these trees I was trying to get rid of. And in our life, we've got to go and with God's help, we need to dig up the root of the bitterness and get it out of our life. So if you've got bitterness against somebody, you've got to do some digging and you got to pull that root out. Because otherwise, if you cut the top of the tree off, cut off even at the trunk, it'll still grow little shoots out of that trunk. And you got to go to the root. And so just like eventually with any kind of electrical draw, we need to go to the root cause of it and get rid of it. And so just a quick thought there as we close the program. It's kind of a weird way interesting way to close a program about bitterness, but it's better than talking about baloney, I guess. Is very important because bitterness can kind of creep up and you don't even realize how bitter you might be. So very important that we dig up those roots. Don't let any bitterness take seed and hold. Dig it up if you realize you've got bitterness against someone, and get it out. Get it out of your life. Forgive that person. Forgiveness is what gets rid of the root. Forgiveness is what gets rid of those roots of bitterness. So we need to, forgiveness only comes from God. And God is the only one that can give us the strength to forgive. We cannot in our own selves forgive others. We can do it kind of on a superficial level, but really True forgiveness comes from God, and God gives us that power and strength to forgive others. Remember what Ephesians 4:32 says. Be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. So we forgive others with the same amount of forgiveness as God has forgiven us through Jesus Christ. That's supernatural. Only comes from God. Can't do it in ourselves. So today, let's be forgiving toward one another, even as God has forgiven us of our sin through the blood of Jesus Christ. Well, thanks again for tuning in today to Nuts and Bolts. We have reached the bottom of the hour, 5:30 in the afternoon here in Milwaukee. The sun is setting, and so I must go. But thanks again for taking time to listen, to watch. Remember, next week we're only going to be on the Lighthouse Christian Radio Facebook and YouTube channels. So find us there next week. In the meantime, stay close to God. Get those roots out of bitterness out of your life, and don't eat bologna.